This episode of Artist Decoded is brought to you by No Wave Academy. As creatives and artists, we have each personally experienced the turbulent road of artistic self-improvement. And as the co-founder of the LA-based artist collective No Wave and No Wave Academy, I can tell you that our objective is to offer an alternative path to a traditional arts education. No Wave Academy courses are taught by some of our favorite artists. They're also our personal heroes and colleagues. Some of these artists you may have heard on this very podcast, while others have been featured in exhibitions at the No Wave Gallery. Such artists include Casey Baugh, Mia Bergeron, Nick Runge, Sean Cheatham, and Kate Zambrano, to name a few. All of our instructors are working professional artists that have been showcased in galleries and museums, both locally and around the world. At No Wave Academy, we work tirelessly towards evolving the way you learn and to expand your artistic passion and craft from the very best in the field. We believe that everyone has a unique artistic spirit. With guidance, experience, and the proper tools, students have the ability to invigorate and elevate their work. You can unlock and unblock your creative inner voice. Join us and walk into the next chapter of your personal artistic evolution. Go to nowaveacademy.com. That's nohwaveacademy.com. Type in AD-10 at checkout for 10% off. Now, on to the episode. Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of Artist Decoded. I'm your host Yoshino, and welcome to the start of a brand new year. I think it's safe to say that we all needed a hard reset from an extremely challenging year last year. I'll speak for myself and say that I personally needed one, but what better way to start the year than to think about the process of creating artwork? Am I right? And this episode was really great because I was able to talk to Shari Frilot, who is the senior programmer of the Sundance Film Festival and the chief curator of New Frontier. And we had Shari on Artist Decoded back in 2016, but I'm glad that we were able to have this discussion and dialogue and to be able to share the time and space together to talk about things such as the evolution of the VR space. We also talked about wave particle dualities, which is a subject that was frankly a bit new to me, but it was fun to do a little bit of research on that. And we talked about the importance that art plays into shifting our perspective, which led us to talking about neuroplasticity a bit. We drifted into conversations about representation, storytelling, and the gradual shift in consciousness, and why representation matters, and how Shari has seen it from her firsthand experience through curating through Sundance. I always have such a cathartic experience talking to Shari. She even answered the question about how a filmmaker might be able to get their film into Sundance. And I'm going to have you wait a bit for that little tidbit of wisdom because she gives some very important advice on that subject. Tickets to Sundance just became available today. The entire festival will be taking place online this year. They created a really interesting way to showcase their films through a virtual space. So you're going to have to find out by checking the festival out. It starts on January 28th and ends on February 3rd. Don't miss your chance to watch all of the films they're premiering at the event. You can get tickets at tickets.festival.sundance.org. And there you go. I'll be there. Feel free to hit me up if you would like to meet up in a virtual avatar space. Before we begin, leave us a review on iTunes or go donate to us on our Patreon, patreon.com/artistdecoded. So here it is, my conversation with Shari Frilot. Hope you enjoy it. Yeah, so how are you doing?
I'm I'm doing pretty good. It's amazing to get to this place after a really tough year. It's kind of amazing to be on the
Oh,
cusp.
tough year. What are you talking about?
It's amazing to be on the cusp of 2021, I tell you.
Yeah,
I like
definitely.
saying it, 2021.
I know. Yeah. I always thought that, I mean, I don't know. I'm not like a psychic or or anything, but I always thought, like 2020 would signify some sort of come to consciousness, and I don't know, maybe that's just me projecting something. But I I mean, and it has in a lot of ways, and it's interesting. I mean, looking back at like everything that's happened this year, and with the pandemic and the social injustice issues and everything, and how, I mean, hopefully it pushes us into a greater state of consciousness in terms of the collective conscious. But yeah, I don't know. We'll
Well,
see.
certainly, I think it certainly has shifted on a global scale, a consciousness, that is distinct from what happened where we were at before the pandemic and also before, the Me Too generation. I certainly find myself watching movies in a really different way. I think about how I'm connected and listen and connecting locally in a stronger way since the pandemic.
Hmm.
Talking to people, friends, colleagues around the world, I feel closer to them because it was
Hmm.
always travel that kept us apart, and now it doesn't. So
Yeah.
I do think that there's some pretty profound shifts and changes in consciousness and what the world is to individuals and who we are as a collective. We'll
Hmm.
see where it takes us.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. But it seems like that's heavily embedded in the work that you do as well. I mean, I was listening to the Voices of VR podcast. And by the way, you and I forget, I think his name's Ken.
Kent By.
Kent.
Hmm.
You both, listening to you both riff makes me feel like I'm like, oh man, I feel like I'm a dummy a little bit compared. I mean, just listening to both you, like I was like, oh man, you guys have this sort of like scientific flow that I found really compelling and interesting. And actually, my first question is based off of that conversation.
Okay.
And okay, so I've been, I'm always personally trying to find the confluence in a lot of things. And recently, I've been taking a dive deeper into neuroscience and the sciences, and bringing on people from those fields onto the podcast
Mm.
to talk about their experiences and how it relates to life and all of these sort of things, right? And then so, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but in the quantum world, there's a wave particle duality. Am I correct?
Yes.
Which describes the properties of photons and subatomic particles to exhibit properties of both waves and particles.
That's
And I find you fascinating because from what I've read and heard from you, you have a really solid grasp of both the arts and science and a deep love and appreciation for that. And I know that you have a background in, I believe, engineering. Is that correct?
that's what I went to school.
Which you went to school for. Yeah. And and I feel that all innovation is about the commingling of the two, of the arts and the sciences, and trying to find a confluence of that. And I'm curious what you think about that, and being able to have all these amalgamated experiences through your life, through how you act as a curator, how all these things inform you, and all of that. So,
Hmm. Well, gosh, that's a juicy question. I read a book a long time ago by a neuro. He was a neurosurgeon named Leonard Schlein. He's since passed, but he wrote a book called Art and Physics, and in that book, he talks about art practice and the world of art, like societal practice of art, societal practice of science, and societal practice of religion, as ultimately going after a very similar goal, which is to set upon a paradigm through which we can understand the world around us. And in this book, he actually establishes that movements in art predate movements in science by a good, decades. and essentially positing, and I think rightly so, that if you can visualize, what the world, the organization of the world, and understanding and relationship to the world, then you're able to act on that visualization, and it informs the development of science and thought and philosophy, and that impacts, how we relate to one another as people and as society. I started out in the sciences. I went to school. I got to get engineering degree, or not a degree, but a scholarship to go to school. And I became obsessed with culture, the name culture. What was it? I realized I didn't know what culture was. I was very into sciences, and it was like I was the first person to go to college in my family. But culture is something that was much more elusive to me than physics and chemistry. I was drawn so powerfully to it, and I picked up an art practice of collage, and found images, and really started to become fascinated with the aesthetic practice of creating something larger than the sum of its parts. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how my art practice started. And I think I'm still at it with the practice of curation, because it's very much, creating meaning by bringing together different films, different artworks, different art communities to create something that wasn't there before, that's generative, something that's generative. The wave particle duality of our material world is really fascinating. As the basic elements of our physical world are both wave and particle, we can only know one at a time. If we know something about the particle property or quality of a photon, right, we cannot know the wave. If we know the wave at the velocity, we cannot know the position of it. And this is the big conundrum of quantum physics. In a certain sense, it evidences that itself in how, at least in American culture, Western culture, the culture of individuality, the culture of free will and our own agency, even like Southern California culture of, not my own backyard,
Yeah, exactly.
It's a very strong, and we see that in our society, very, muscularly developed, particularly in American culture, and how, this pandemic is spreading in behaviors that's rooted in individualistic behavior and values. But that's only half of our identity. The wave particle duality has very much to do with who we are individually as a being. We are individual, but we are also part of an energetic wave, a consciousness that's connected and yearns connection with other people.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think this time is definitely challenging a lot of those dualities and a lot of those experiences. And it's interesting to see how different cultures and different countries have dealt with the pandemic, for instance, on an individualistic or more collectivist level. And I think, this pandemic has definitely opened up the floodgates to us understanding, even from like a microcosmic level, and understanding just the systems that are in place, the capitalistic systems that we live in America, and how that has also shaped us as individuals, which can be good in a certain sense, but it could also be negative in the collective sense, right? And yeah, I find it interesting because I brought that question up because, I mean, it sounds like specifically your approach to things in the beginning was more from a theoretical standpoint, right? In terms of when you were like in college and, doing engineering. Is that correct?
Well, the brand of engineering that I was interested in pursuing was biomedical engineering, and I was very interested in the eye. And so it was always rooted in the body. And I've been interested in how bodies connect and how bodies connect with energy, with other people. And I've always questioned, it's funny, I rewatched Interstellar last night, and I was kind of shocked by this question that came up that I used to ask a lot which is there is there like a physical or a mathematical or scientific explanation or characterization of love?
Is this a question that you had for yourself while you were watching it?
No, this is a question that I used to think of and think of a lot now. Just when as an engineering student, that I didn't think about culture, and I could see how powerful it was, how energetically powerful, how real it is. But it was at that time thought about as something outside of science, and I thought, and I it was hard to not ask the question: does it fall in the realm of science? Is love, is emotion, is desire, is that are these artifacts of quantum behavior? Is there an overlap? Is there a relationship, an explicative relationship between quantum physics and emotion? Something that has always fascinated me.
Mm-hmm. Is that that train of thought, is that what drew you into wanting to understand the romantic sciences?
It drew me to artwork, and because I started my practice started out with collage, and how two images that can be different when put together not only become something else, but something that could potentially be very powerful in the way that it affects the viewer. And what is that? What is that? It's one thing to see something, but it's another thing to feel the biochemistry change in you when you see something. And that's a very powerful agent that's happening in cinema. I think this is what drew me to cinema, is that when you're watching films, your body changes, your biochemistry changes, you get these emotions, and it's because you're watching a story, you're watching an image, you're watching the cinema, and it's having a chemical effect on you. And that's fascinating. And it's so real, it's so palpable. And I guess that's how the sciences and the arts kind of merged for me, is trying to understand and engage with that dynamic of the shift in biochemistry that one experiences watching cinema.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I find it interesting how each side can potentially discredit the other. I mean, I'm just speaking in kind of general in terms of like art and science, but art and science are the things that explore the unknown, in their own sort of various ways, or questions of the unknown rather. And I don't know, something, that when you were talking right now, and something about just thinking of the idea of neuroplasticity came to mind, and how I think like, I might get this a little bit wrong, so please bear with me. But so with children, it's a lot easier for children to learn new languages and learn new things because they have less essentially space that's taken up within their brain, right? So they're essentially like sponges is, I guess, a good metaphor for that. But as adults, we need to intensely focus on something in order to activate the brain in a way to where we can learn new things. And it's interesting just being able, like you were saying, like activating the senses by watching a film or something. And the more that you actually focus in on that film, the more, or whatever form of art it is, the more that you can understand and appreciate that thing. But it also, you can potentially, if you're asking the right questions, connect a certain framework that you believe in into something, So that's not really a question, but it's more of just like parlaying off of what you were saying. But I don't know. It's interesting. Like just the art is so powerful, and it's something that if you make the decision to be connected with yourself in order to understand things that are outside of yourself, the more that you can actually learn about yourself, And so I guess I'm curious, like, through just your years of curating, and, you've been with Sundance for over 20 years now. Is that correct?
That sounds about right. Since 98, I've been with Sundance. So,
Yeah. And so like I'm curious just, through your experiences and this could be a very, very, very long question and answer, but through your experiences, like how maybe can you talk about things that have shaped you along the way that have helped inform you as yourself as a person, but also how you curate and all of that?
gosh, yeah. Hearing you talk about kids and how their ability to learn things in a different way than adults are able to learn things. The way that the brain, as I understand it, works is, it's a big pattern recognition machine. The things that we recognize as real are patterns that we have made agreements to identify that it is real. So that is to say, this is a coffee cup, right? It's a pattern. As a child, we might want to know what this is, but as an adult, we say this is a coffee cup because we were taught it was a coffee cup. Other people say it's a coffee cup. We have agreed that this is a coffee cup, right? Mm-hmm. But the only real thing is the light. What we see, we don't see anything except for light and what the light bounces off of things. It's the story that we tell, that we assign. The story of the coffee cup becomes our reality, right? Mm-hmm. And the more we say that story, that is a coffee cup, the more we're unwilling to think it's something else, right?
Yeah.
So we
I love that. Uh-huh.
and so it's those and these neural pathways, they become more robust the more we use them, right? And other pathways are less robust. And with kids, it's all open. They don't have pathways that tell the story of the world have yet to be developed, right? What's great about the arts is that it opens up new neural pathways and it makes new realities possible because it helps us see the patterns in a different way, right? So this coffee cup can become a sculpture. Yeah. If we see it in a way that has meaning to us.
A beautiful coffee cup, by the way.
Right?
just saying,
They took the handle off and put it over here.
It looks great. I like it.
Yeah, but it is kind of a sculpture, like
totally.
This is a new power. That is a new neural pathway.
Yeah,
I can say that it's a coffee cup, but that's so. With that, like, to answer your question, I got into, curation because as an artist, I was making work, in the 80s, in the 90s, that was outside our culture, right? It was experimental. It never really fit into any kind of, neural pathway, mainstream neural pathway of the time. Mm-hmm. And so, curation was a way to create a new way of organizing, or new way of engaging cinema and cinema culture and artists who were between disciplines, people who painted and then make movies, or people who were into digital art and also making films, or installation, photography, as opposed to, as a curator, through that practice, I was able to mix them in different ways and create a different kind of conversation. And in that, to open up and make the conversation more capacious, more open to trying new things in experimentation. And so after, decades of this work, I think it works. It really does work. Like, it's, we didn't have the kind of movies and television shows that we have available to us from the time that I started at Sundance to today. We've seen movements, there's gay revolution on television, people of color, movies and directors. There's so many more now than there were before. And, I was a part of that. I was a part of fighting for those films, fighting for those filmmakers to come into Sundance, helping them launch their careers. And now they're making work that we can see and talk and see ourselves through and create these new pathways of being and of reality. And it has been enormously gratifying to be able to do that with film.
Wow.
And with New Frontier, that does kind of swing me back over to like the science practice though I will always, I'm probably always going to be an amateur scientist, but I'm fine with, this specific practice of merging and looking at how the overlap of science, art, and technology is. And, with the technology, particularly, with cinema, with digital cinematography, with VR, with artists who are taking technology not to just be able to tell stories in a prepackaged way, in a familiar pathway, but to use to come up with stories that they need to change the technology to tell the story. And that is what happened with VR at Sundance with Nani de la Peña. Is a journalist who just needed to tell a story in a different way, an immersive way, because she was just tired of writing about homelessness and no one cared, So she creates a VR and it really affects people. And just to see how that has taken off into its own industry and its own art form and its impact on neuroplasticity, that brings that plasticity, the awareness of that plasticity in a very visceral sense to the body. You can really feel sometimes a shift in reality. You can feel your proprioception in new ways. So it's interesting in my practice as a curator. What I've probably learned the most is, and have come to appreciate the most, is the importance of our artists, the importance of our visionaries. And it's really striking, in our culture, in American culture, art and movies, it's such a temptation to think about them as entertainment, stuff that we do on our leisure time.
Totally.
It's the way that we wind down or we let go. It's the thing that comes easy, but doing it is really hard. And if you're like watching a movie and you're swept away and somebody worked really hard for you to be able to do that. But, the exceptional films, the exceptional artistic achievements allow us to see the world in a broader way, in a deeper way, in a more internal way. It shifts our awareness of the world, of ourselves, of each other. That's a very basic human practice, is awareness and how to shift our awareness.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, halfway through what you were saying, I was getting a little bit chills, just what you're talking about in terms of representation and also just what you do. I mean, I think, there's all kinds of different intentions for being a curator, for wanting to curate and those sort of things. But it seems that you have been able to find your own sort of framework and your own sort of understanding of how certain interests, what sort of stories to tell, what sort of stories to highlight within, a context of, the festival and, people that you have to collaborate with, at Sundance. But I don't know, there's no real question there. It's just, just kind of riffing with you a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's cool. I mean,
Yeah.
I was actually, I should pick up the other half of what I had picked up in terms of the story of that, as an artist, starting out and kind of like not finding a good place in the world that was already built, the importance of creating a new world. There are lives in the balance of this stuff too. When you see movies and Black people are being killed and have no real character, that is a reality that is being built inside the viewer of these characters. And so the movies are incredibly important to shift the awareness. There is no justice without a cultural shift.
Totally.
Right. And so, I'm also very moved and driven by that awareness of that connection in the kinds of movies that I'm interested and fight for and strive to present at the festival. And it's not
Definitely.
really a political thing. It's really a soul thing. It's a human thing. If you can expand the spectrum of humanity that you see on the screen or in installation, in any kind of artistic engagement, you will learn more about those people, and you will learn about them as people as opposed to the kinds of characters that die in the first act.
Totally. Yeah. And that's super important to be able to present, I mean, since we're talking about films, that sort of understanding to a mass audience. And something that just kind of comes to mind is thinking about that old saying, you can lead the horse to water, but it has to take a drink, you know? And so that, that's what you can hopefully do as a curator, is be able to curate in a way that it presents these certain ideas, and each person brings their own projection of their own reality into a context, into a conversation such as this. And the same with watching a film or looking at a piece of artwork. Some people can either write off that film or that piece of artwork and say, I don't understand it, that's weird, or whatever it may be, right? But I think it behooves us to constantly be open and constantly be able to recontextualize our reality, or what we deem as to be our reality, and try to understand, wait a second, in a conversation, maybe it's a challenging one, let's say, am I the one that's wrong here? Or are you the one that's wrong here? Is there a subjective truth, or is there an objective truth that we're trying to figure out? And really, I mean, I think what we're talking about is just overall empathy too. Being able to empathize with our fellow humans and to really sit down. And I think that's what's missing from our culture a lot today, is being able to really listen to someone and sit down and be like, oh, wow, I really understand where you're coming from, and try to take the time to understand where they're coming from. And I think this year has taught us, if anything, that is to be, like you were saying earlier, like the friends that you have that are abroad or not living in, the same, city, to really be able to appreciate those times and have gratitude towards those moments. And,
yeah, it's definitely about the conversation that we have with each other, and the conversations that we find ourselves open to, and the conversations that we become open to, because the conversation is what we learn, from another person. And if we learn about, if all we know about Black people is that they die in the first act, then how open are we going to be to have conversations? But here's the thing: if what we know about Black people it came from movies in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, so many Black characters, they die in the first act, right? And that's what, that's the awareness that we have. We see it in our cinema. That's the reflection. What does that engender in somebody when you encounter Black people in a conversation, or in school, or in a forum? What do you bring? What do you expect? And what is it that you think that person is going to have to offer?
Totally.
And it's a disconnect, because what the movie is telling you, the movie culture is telling you, is really different from what that person, various different Black people have to actually offer.
Totally. Yeah.
And it's more than justice. It is value, because I'm a Black person, living in a society that has shut me out, has provoked me to hack at different ways, think about ways of getting work out, getting conversations out.
Yeah.
It affects how I see the world, right? And it's different than a mainstream way.
Yeah.
And that conversation, and that's value. It's value that I bring to the table, because it opens up a new world. It opens up a new conversation where we can generate new ways of being. And I think that's really the key, I think, is that our cinema culture, because it's so successful, it's so many people know the movies, they know American movies, and so many choices that we make in our lives are connected to the movies that we've seen. And,
Totally.
we can't afford, especially at this juncture, for the movies to shut down our ability to see the value in others.
Mm.
And the things that we can learn from other people, other cultures that have not gotten a fair shake in the cinema. It's, more than just giving the fair shake. It's we need that knowledge to come together to face some of the larger things that we are facing right now.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and as you were just talking right now, I was thinking about that film Trading Places. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And just how I mean, it's we laugh about it now, but it's so sad. It's essentially like if no one's seen this film Trading Places, it's Eddie Murphy is this homeless guy on the street, and then the executives of this banking firm, they make a bet with each other, these two white executives, and they say, I think I could make anyone have whatever Dan Aykroyd's job was. I think it was Dan Aykroyd, right? Was in that film?
It was Eddie Murphy, and I think it was Dan Aykroyd. I'm not
Dan
sure.
Aykroyd, right? But he was basically like a lower, not like almost an executive level, right? And those two executives made a bet and said, I bet I can turn anyone to do whatever Dan Aykroyd's job was. And then they kicked Dan Aykroyd out of the street and they brought Eddie Murphy into the firm. And, it's a comedy, but at the same time, it's like, what are you telling the audience, right? Who's making these fucking films? and it's like, what are you telling the audience, right? And I don't know. And it's interesting, like you talking just about representation in general. And I know that you had a film in the late 90s, and I believe it was is the festival called Mix?
Oh yeah, that's my first festival. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was listening to you talk about it and how I don't know if this created the spark to necessarily want you to get into curating, but you said something to the effect that that film was getting pigeonholed essentially into something that the film wasn't really about. Can you speak about that a little bit? Maybe I'm
okay. Yeah, I think you're talking about my very first short film called A Cosmic Demonstration of Sexuality.
That's the one. Yes.
Yeah. And it was before it was Mix. It showed at the New York Lesbian Gay Experimental Film Video Festival.
Mm-hmm.
And that was actually a really positive experience. It was the first time I'd ever shown the film, and a lot of different kinds of people watched it and had a really great conversation. It launched the film to show at a bunch of festivals. And that's kind of where I started to see an unhealthy pattern, because it was always like the black gay shorts, and it was always programmed in bad times and really small venues, and it was just consistent. It wasn't the way that the experimental festival had organized it and curated it. And that's when, after touring that film, the second time I had my next film, the organizers of the New York, it was Sarah Schulman and Jim Hubbard. They offered, they wanted to step down. They offered me the opportunity to take that on. And I thought, well, this is an opportunity to be able to change the framing, to change that experience for other filmmakers. And that's why I took it on and renamed the festival Mix.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So switching gears just a little bit, but going back to, your curatorial statement for this year. And can you speak about what the main focus was for this year and some of the reflections you might have had in terms of curating for the 2021 Sundance Film Festival and for New Frontier?
Well, this year was such a heavy lift because of the pandemic, because we had to do everything virtually. And it continues to happen in real time. Generally, and still today, I always follow the artists. What comes our way, what comes across our desk, and also, being in conversation with artists and curators and in the art world, in the film world, in the technology world, always listening in for who's doing what. That's always been that's always been the way it starts. And then looking at that work and coming, figuring out how to present it. But this year, it was also how to present it because we generally put it in a venue inside of, Park City, inside of the Sundance Film Festival in Park City, and construct the venue so that it has an interesting conversation, with the festival at large. Mm-hmm. And this year we didn't have a venue. So on top of, figuring out what is the bleeding edge of what artists are doing, where is the fresh boundaries that they're pushing, we also had to figure out how to present the work. And it was really ambitious because this year, there was just really amazing VR work, live theater experiences, work that was both VR and TV episodic projects. There were time capsules. There were a number of creative browser works. All these different, there's a sound work. There are all these different works that needed different devices, different platforms. So we kind of had to figure out, well, how are we going to present this to people in their homes? And that really got me thinking. I realized I had to shift my paradigm. I need to completely think differently on what it was that I thought I was building this festival on. And I realized that we had started talking about, developing this idea of the biodigital continuum at the festival a couple of years, ever since I saw the bird, the scooter bird, proliferate like a flash, at work. And then it was in my neighborhood and it was in Santa Monica, it was everywhere. And I realized this is a virus. This is actually an internet. This is a viral phenomenon that is digitally propelled, but it is physical. And I realized that it was one and the same, that there was a biodigital continuum. And I started to pay attention to apps that did that the continuum being a person goes onto the app to meet another person to come back to the ground and then go back to the app. So it's like it's this continuum. So I was like, okay, let me take that idea and really think thoroughly what it is that we have been building this thing all along on. We built it in brick and mortar venue. There were people in there. They all had devices. They had computers. They had phones. We had VR headsets and computers, and that was how we built the venue. And I realized that I was ignoring half of the hardware in the venue. I was ignoring the devices in everybody's pockets and the computers that they would bring in and do their work. And then I was like, okay, well then I'd push it further. So how those devices are connected by satellites. Those computers are connected by fiber optic cables. This is all the texture of modern life. We are not indivisible. We don't exist outside of it. We are a part of this continuum.
Yeah.
So I realized that, when we realized that, all right, this pandemic, we're probably going to have to primarily focus on building an online festival. And it just never sat right with me, online. It's like, this is not online. This is, we're on the continuum, and I just need to find out how we sit on the continuum and figure out like how to present a cohesive program or a program of access, a protocol of access in people's homes, on their devices around the world. So that is where we realized that we needed to build a bespoke website for New Frontier. So in addition to this year, in addition to a very robust, really great website that is designed to stream the films and world premiere the films, that was developed by Shift 72 and internal staff. With New Frontier, we built a bespoke website that could present a wide range of different kinds of work and different platforms and different devices. And so we used WebXR to develop this. And it's a website that is accessible on VR headset and on computer interchangeably. So once you're up, you can put on your headset to check out VR and take it off and check out something that's on for single channel work or a sound work, toss it to your phone.
Hmm.
And when we realized we could do that, I worked with a really great developer named Active Theory. They're really awesome, and they've been through the festival before. I found them through people at the festival, at New Frontier. It was just really leaned into my own community and found the tools, found the imagination, found the desire to build something that had not been built before. And that is to say, we've developed something that stands on the shoulders of all the XR festivals that have gone out. But this is something that the site is accessible to infinite number of users. You can be in a room of 250 people at a time. There is webcam proximity chat. Mm-hmm. So, the idea of meeting people where they're at in home, this is how we do it right now. We're webcam chatting. So that had to be a part of how these avatars were able to chat to each other. Mm. And it has to be spatial so that we can meet a lot of different people according to like our social, sort of how we have learned to socialize in a space. So, so we built the gallery and realized as we were building New Frontier, as the festival was building, the streaming site, and realized that they were still working to bring people together, because that's the heart of our festivals: people, our community coming together, and artists connecting with audiences. And that's something that our filmmakers, even before, are selling to Netflix and just having a hard time understanding who the audience is. And so we realized we can do more than just build a gallery. We can build a social space for the festival. Wow. And that's what we did. So we have a gallery is one of the venues. We have a social space. It's called Film Party. It's a main room that holds 250 people with 6 rooms around it that also hold 250 people. And each room will be dedicated to throwing a party. Basically, it's going to be dedicated to a premiere party for the film after that it's been as it's been unspooled on the main site. And you can come and be with the people that were watching the movies, actually meet them, meet the artists, meet the filmmakers, and have the conversation in avatar.
That's amazing.
It's really, really exciting. And you can do it just like the way that we're doing it now, but not in Zoom. It's an avatar. It's hard to explain. I have to show it to you, but it's an avatar that is like, it's basically, I characterized it as Zoom meets Fortnite meets Legoland. So the bodies are like very playful Legoland bodies, and they run like the Fortnite characters, and their heads, if you want to chat with somebody, will turn into a webcam and you can talk to people. And
that is incredible.
It's so fresh. And Active Theory did such a great job. So that was the second venue, and then of course we're a film festival. We're all in it because of that amazing, powerful feeling that you get when you're inside of a cinema with other people and seeing a movie on the big screen. So we built a cinema house as well. Wow. We built a big screen cinema, and it's 200 people can come in at a time. It's a VR only cinema. We'll be showing films like Station to Station by Doug Aitken, Mother of George by Andrew Desonmu. We'll be showing one of the doc films in competition, Users by Natalia Almada. A selection of short films that are in the festival. We'll be showing all of these, and we'll have a chance. If you have a headset, you can enter the cinema and talk to people, catch up with folks 10 minutes before, until the curtain calls, and you sit down and you watch this amazing, delicious cinema on a spaceship. You can see Earth on outside. You can see the International Space Station right outside the ceiling as you watch this film. And then you can go and party and meet people and continue the conversation in Film Party.
That is so cool. It's almost like an MMORPG, but it's very similar to an MMORPG in certain ways, or in the interactive ways, the communication ways, like World of Warcraft or EverQuest, or like those are like older ones. League of Legends.
I see what you're saying. Yes. Yeah. It is I guess, it definitely borrows from the gaming culture,
Mm,
the technology, but it is focused on humanity. And this is one of the things that I learned, going to other festivals, and is that I'm missing people's faces.
mm,
Like to meet an avatar,
mm.
whether it's in Animal Crossing or Fortnite or VR chat. The avatar can be really fantastical, and it's fun to do that. But I wanted this to be human,
Totally. That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
and so it is an MMORPG for human beings for the specific purpose of expanding cinema culture and the
Totally.
conversation and the experience and the magic of cinema. All of those venues, we decided that we would situate that next to the International Space Station because the festival is also in satellites. It's being beamed down. It's a
Mm,
part of what networks us. And so to experience New Frontier on laptop and especially in VR is just amazing. There's a developer working just on the Earth because the International Space Station orbits the Earth 16 times a day.
mm.
So you feel that movement when you're on these venues,
Wow.
and
That's so
and
cool.
it's something to more a meaningful place to discuss the films, I think,
Mm,
and to make new community in this way.
mm. So I'm curious, like on a personal level, do you think that, based off of what you just said, do you think that you like to find the silver lining a lot?
I am forced to find silver lining because I oftentimes get the shaft served to me on a silver platter. I'm like, no, man, that ain't dinner. That's a shaft. Where's the silver lining? So yeah, that's a part. That's actually a strategy, a survival strategy is the silver lining for me.
Yeah, forced to find. I mean, in many ways, you can probably see it like culturally, also with yeah, trying to find this. I mean, like I don't know. It's what a challenging year it's been, right?
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, and I don't know. I just bring that up because it's like I think about that in terms of
Mm.
just being able to cognitively reframe certain things, certain traumas that happen to you, whether it's on a personal level or on a collective societal level, and trying to constantly find that silver lining and not get jaded by the experiences from your surroundings. And you can also think of that very much as like a stoic idea, being in control of yourself, being in control of your own thoughts, as opposed to allowing outside forces to penetrate, your entire well-being. So I think about that in terms of the silver lining.
Yeah. I think about silver lining as a creative practice. It's
Hmm. Yeah.
it's being presented something and told or asked that you accept it as true, and even though it's not really in your interest. And so then you just have to be creative to find, well, what else is there? What does this leave me, and how
Mm.
am I going to achieve what I'm interested in? How am I going to achieve something positive out of a negative? And that's silver lining, right? And boy, I mean, this year with the festival, the silver lining is almost it's it answers so many problems because during the festival we would have the venue, we have only so many headsets, the venue's only so big, we have enormous demand, we could never get in at all of the people in to see this work. So instead of having 20 headsets in the venue, now the website, which is open globally,
Mm.
is accessible to anybody who has a headset,
Mm.
and they can see all of the work. So
Mm.
that this solves huge problems for us.
Mm.
And and our artists are pivoting, finding the silver lining of what once was a live performance is now a WebXR installation that will now be seen by so many more people
Mm.
than if had they launched it in a theater in Brooklyn,
Yeah.
a live theater. So it's different, of course, But the engagement is a silver lining in a pretty huge and valuable one. There's a piece called Tinker, a VR work it's the kind of work that I love. It's ambitious work. It's a live theater experience where you can go in with other people and you can go in and you can engage with a live performer. This is the kind of work that is very difficult to launch, or has been very difficult to launch in a venue because they're very expensive and it requires a lot of space. And this artist figured out how to do it virtually. And so now he can show this to so many more people than we were able to do last year with a piece called Scarecrow. It was very similar. Stepped up to the technology, found this amazing silver lining of the ability to present live theater experience in VR virtually. So these are more than silver linings. These are breakthroughs.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah. I mean, it seems like being able to be more inclusive as opposed to being exclusive, because I think sometimes, with not just Sundance, but a lot of these festivals, it seems very exclusive, in terms of the access to the outside world to be able to be part of the experience. Right. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, I mean, like you were saying, it seems like it solves a lot of problems. And I mean, maybe that is like a human survival mechanism in this, within this example, right? Is trying to figure out how to keep on keeping on, essentially.
Yeah, I am keep on keeping on, but it's like we really did open up New Frontier specifically, right? To from having to buy the ticket, find the housing, get the pass, just to, a very rarefied group of people, to it's accessible globally. It's $25 for the whole festival, and so many people have access to it. The conversation, the whole reason why I got into this, to begin with, which was like to build that conversation, is now going to, it has the potential to expand on such a grand scale, it's, and also answer the problem of that we were having even before the pandemic of filmmakers, showing on streaming platforms, unable to see their audience, engage with their audience, not understanding like who are they who's seeing this movie, and us being forced to do this and seeing that we could do this really meets that challenge. Really puts the filmmakers in touch with their audience face to face. And hear their response and open that conversation up, and not just to the people who can afford to get to Park City, but everybody who can afford a pass, which is just so much less than what it used to, what it costs to get to the festival. Like even if you bought a headset, right? It's $300, Oculus Quest 2. You couldn't even fly to Park City from New York for that. And now you can see the whole New Frontier and be in a cinema together and meet all of the artists in the community. I mean, it's just something else. I'm really excited about this year's festival.
Wow. That's super inspiring. I mean, Shari, you're, I always enjoy having conversations with you. You're such a, influential badass. I'm not just saying that lightly to, but, I want to end on just one question. And I generally ask this question, but, what advice would you have for artists and creatives?
Oh gosh. Trust yourself. Trust what you see, what you want to say. Don't think about the audience, because you never know, what an audience will do with what you have to say, how they want to hear it, how they need to hear it. What an audience needs is to hear you find clarity within your vision. And I get the question often, how do you get it into Sundance? How do the film get into Sundance, right? Like, it is so easy to identify when a filmmaker makes a film and they are so clear on their vision, what they have to say,
Mm.
and they're passionate about it. And if it's a weird thing to say, they end up like innovating the, either story or, aesthetic, or just bringing something really fresh to the table. And it's compelling. It's compelling when somebody sees your film and sees how much you trust your vision, how much you trust what you have to say, how much you're compelled to say it in a very specific way, the way that you want to. I would just say, trust yourself. Don't second guess. Go for
Yeah.
it.
You're giving me more of those goosebumps. I mean, that's so true. And, and this world challenges us in that way to be able to either negate the certain inner thoughts that you have or either to lean in. And what, and I think that's what separates. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I mean, you can even boil this down to like romantic relationships, right? Like if you are not honest with yourself, how are you going to be honest with someone else? I mean, and that could be in the romantic sense or in just a platonic sense. But yeah, and I mean, and that the honesty that you have for yourself, and if you utilize mediums to create, that will be embedded within that creation. And I think, as complex as we build these things up in our mind, sometimes it's just that simple too. Fine, and just trying to get the vocabulary to say more things as well.
I think, this, I'm so glad we get to talk about this, because in the age of social media
Mm.
and kind of the uniformification of
Hmm.
communication, how
Mm.
many times am I going to send a text to a friend that's like written, and then they just send me back, it says loved everything that I like sweated and written, as opposed to telling me something of that, of themselves. The way that our communication is
Mm.
now fitting into a technology that's meant to capture, our behavior, meant to capture our profile, meant to capture our data
Mm.
for their business models,
Totally.
and it's really important, especially with young people, to um, to stand true and stand strong for what you have to say and who you are and how you want to live,
Mm.
and really check in with yourself as you utilize, different platforms and social media and ways of communicating with others. It's important to stay human, and the balance of the biodigital continuum as people becoming gadgets inside of that,
Mm.
uh, a mechanism to go from one platform to their bank to back to the platform, and have no other value than that is at play.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure that, we don't demonize the technology, but we also don't become a part of its hardware
Mm.
solely. We need to stay human in this environment.
Yeah. Well, hmm. And now begins our 4 hour long conversation about humanizing the data economy. So thank you for that introduction. And thanks for the first hour. And now we're going to go into this 4 hour discussion.
It's a big one. It's a meaty one for sure.
Yeah. Anyway.
I mean, all I have to say on that, just to like, artists and content creators they have so much power in this data economy. They are the carrot. The content is where the user is going on their way it's the destination. The content creators create the destination of the journey through which the data is mined and harvested. So I think that, creative power in this data economy is something that there's so much potential to grow. And I think growing in community is something that I'm very excited to see and to help and to foster.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for doing this. This is great. You're
Oh,
you're you're great. Yeah.
uh, You ask all the greatest questions. And so, we really have a good conversation. I remember feeling like this last time. It's just like, gosh, this guy's so human, and you're so the quality of your curiosity is so pure and generous. I really appreciate your conversation. I really do.
Aw,
Thanks for coming back around this year. It's an
yeah,
important year for us, and I'm
yeah.
very grateful for your interest and giving us this opportunity to talk about this new thing that we've put together, we built for people.
That's great. That's great. I'm very excited. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for doing this, and hopefully we can continue the conversation soon, and do our 4 hour long conversation on humanizing the day economy.
Yeah, I hope so.
Maybe that's a 2021 conversation. Um, all right. Well, yeah. Thanks so much, and hope you have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks. You too, Yoshino.
Music for the podcast is by Rarebit, aka Justin Dosher Hopkins. Creative producer is Noah Wainwright. YouTube and creative support is by Tyler Scully. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.